History is more than dates and facts, it's a living tapestry of human experiences. Join me tonight as we unravel its threads and escape into a world long gone. You stand on a hilltop, under a gray sky, the wind tugging at your worn cloak. Below you, the old Roman road gleams faintly in the rain, dead straight, stubbornly defiant, even though it's cracked and overgrown. A few scattered farmers shuffle along it with carts that squeak like mice, and out beyond them, where once there were legions and order, there's now mostly silence. The year's roughly 410 CE, and you're in Roman Britain? Only there's a problem. The Romans, they've left. Well, to be fair, it wasn't all in one dramatic day. No air horn, no "we quit" scroll, nailed to a villa wall. But make no mistake, the troops are gone. Called back across the Channel to defend the crumbling heart of the Western Roman Empire. The Emperor Honorius, busy fending off Visigoths, has reportedly sent a message to the Britons telling them to look to their own defenses. That's medieval speak for good luck out there, guys. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, feel free to post your location. And local time, I always love seeing where you're listening from. Wherever you are, I hope tonight brings you rest, comfort, and maybe a curious dream or two. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The towns begin to empty. With no Roman payroll, no legions to protect them, many citizens flee to the countryside. Villas are abandoned, some burned. You pass a bathhouse being used to store hay, its once polished marble stained with moss. Statues are toppled or worshipped by accident, mistaken for forgotten gods. Civilization doesn't vanish overnight, but it does start skipping meals. Some Romano-British landowners try to keep the old order going, putting on togas and quoting Virgil to their cows. A few minor forts remain in use, their stone reused to build granaries or chicken coops. In places like Wroxeter and Silchester, you see valiant efforts to maintain public life mosaics or repaired markets still open. But even here you sense the unease, like guests tidying up a party after the host has vanished mid-toast. One quirky fact: British towns during this time sometimes became smaller. Rather than expanding, they actually retracted. Residents would barricade themselves into the old town centers and build wooden huts amid the ruins of Roman grandeur. It's a bit like living in a cathedral, but only using the janitor's closet. And with the legions gone, trouble brews fast. Picts raid from the north, Irish warbands harass the western coasts, and Saxon pirates begin to test the shores. The British leaders, many still calling themselves civitas, magistrates, or duces, try to organize militias. But they aren't professional soldiers. They're more like you, probably someone with a rusty sword and a lot of secondhand anxiety. You trudge past a crumbling mile fort, now manned by a dozen farmers with spears that are more patch than metal. They call themselves a comitatus, a warband loyal to a local leader. These men sleep in barns, drink from chipped amphorae, and tell stories of Roman glory like ghost tales. But even as you watch the land unravel, the old Roman bureaucracy clings on in the strangest places. Latin survives on inscriptions in the mouths of aging bishops and on fading wax tablets in dusty storerooms. One odd tablet from this period suggests a tax was still being levied for road repair on roads that barely existed anymore. That's Rome for you, collapsing with paperwork. Historians still argue whether the Roman withdrawal was a total abandonment or just a temporary regrouping that turned permanent. Some think Britain was simply deemed not worth the cost anymore. Others suggest civil war and corruption back home meant there was no choice. Whatever the truth, you're now in a strange limbo caught between empire and anarchy. You find an abandoned Roman mile marker, lean against it, and realize it's also being used to hang wet laundry. Civilization is trying to remember itself but forgets more each day. You follow a ragged group of travelers heading toward Londinium, once a gleaming provincial capital, now mostly rats' roofless basilicas, and some monks debating theology in a corner of the forum. You trade some apples for a night's rest, and overhear one monk say, "Perhaps this is the end of the world." Then he farts and everyone laughs. Some things endure. You wake up on a straw pallet inside what used to be a Roman villa. The mosaic floor beneath you is cracked, but you can still see bits of a hunting scene, two dogs, a stag, and something that might have been a very ambitious wild boar. Above you, ivy creeps through holes in the ceiling. This isn't just where you're sleeping tonight, it's a glimpse of what happens when an empire evaporates, and the people left behind try to patch life together with string prayer and memory. With Rome gone, the people of Britain don't all immediately plunge into barbarism. Not yet. Many continue to speak Latin, wear Roman tunics, and host small-scale councils to settle disputes. These Romano-British elites still cling to the structure of the past. They mint local coins, enforce Roman-style laws, and commission new manuscripts of scripture. You even see one nobleman trying to hold a Senate-like gathering in a half-collapsed bathhouse. There's wine, a lot of loud talking, and a chicken sitting in what used to be the caldarium. But order is cracking, fast. Without centralized military support, local power becomes the new currency. Warlords begin popping up everywhere like mushrooms after rain. Some have Roman blood. Others just have sharp swords and louder voices. And almost all of them like to call themselves kings, even if their kingdoms consist of 3 hills, a bog, and someone's aunt's orchard. You hear names Cuneta in the north, perhaps fighting off Picts, or Dumnonia in the southwest, still Roman in spirit but increasingly insular. They ride horses, hold feasts, and squabble with one another in a dozen dialects. Alliances shift with the moon. You're never sure if the man offering you bread at one camp won't try to stab you for your shoes in the next. Quirkier still, some communities continue to build in Roman style. At Tintagel on the Cornish coast, you see a group building stone houses with slate roofs, importing wine from the Mediterranean and scribbling Latin graffiti about taxes and love affairs. It's like Rome got stuck in a time loop there. One graffito simply reads, "The wine was good," a timeless sentiment. Religious leaders, meanwhile, step into the leadership vacuum. Monasteries multiply, some tucked deep in forests or perched on remote islands. One bishop you meet, wrapped in a frayed robe and radiating caffeine-deprived exasperation, spends half his day trying to convert local farmers, and the other half arguing about whether sheep can be blessed in Latin or must be sprinkled in the local tongue. It's theological chaos meets animal husbandry. You pass through a village that holds onto Roman traditions with comic determination. They celebrate Saturnalia with cabbage masks and chant to a statue of Mercury they now call Old Quickfoot. They have no idea what Mercury stood for, but the statue's got a nice hat. At the same time, Roman infrastructure begins to crumble. Roads are unmaintained. Aqueducts go dry. You see one man using an aqueduct to dry his laundry and another converting a milestone into anvil support. Forts are repurposed into sheep pens or filled with peat. A forum becomes a field for grazing goats. Public baths. Mostly ruins, occasionally hot boxes for monks trying to relive Roman hygiene with more incense and less plumbing. Historians still argue whether this period was a slow, sad decay or a surprisingly adaptive transformation. Was Britain entering a dark age or just learning how to live differently with less marble and more mud? There's definitely more mud. And into this chaos creeps fear. Rumors spread. You hear whispering at a village fire about sea-wolves beings who come with the tides, tall and blonde, wearing furs and wielding axes. No one's quite seen them yet, but they leave behind burnt villages and terrified fishermen. The old Roman garrisons are empty, but they haven't been forgotten. You see children playing soldier with rusted helmets too big for their heads. They shout words that sound like legion and centrio, even if they don't know what they mean. You sit in a roadside inn where the stew tastes suspiciously like squirrel, and an old woman recites Roman stories to earn her bread tales of Julius Caesar's arrival, of Boudicca's rebellion of emperors long gone. The audience nods wide-eyed like she's describing gods and ghosts. One boy clutches a broken piece of Roman pottery as if it were a relic. Maybe it is. In many ways, it's not just Rome that has left Britain, it's the idea of Rome. And the people left behind are trying to remember that idea while also figuring out where to get their next meal and how to stop the roof from falling in. And yet, there's something oddly comforting about this makeshift world. People barter, they sing in the evenings, they share bread old stories and occasionally some very questionable cheese. Life hasn't ended. It's just limping along in new boots. You fall asleep that night to the sound of wind through half-glazed windows and distant sheep. Somewhere just beyond hearing someone is hammering a bit of tin into a crown. A new king, maybe, or a fool. You're standing on a jagged shoreline, the cold spray of the sea biting at your face. A row of strange ships cuts through the waves, a dozen long, narrow boats with fierce dragon heads carved on their prows. Their sails flap like angry birds in the breeze, and on board are tall, broad-shouldered men with hair the color of ripe wheat and eyes as sharp as hawks. The Saxons have arrived. These aren't just any visitors, they're mercenaries hired muscle with swords sharper than their manners. Britain's local rulers, desperate for help against marauding neighbors and rebellious tribes, have called them across the sea. But as you've probably guessed, inviting a pack of wolves inside your henhouse rarely ends well. The Saxons bring new ways with them, iron smithing skills, fast horses, and a no-nonsense approach to fair negotiation that usually involves pointy sticks. They're famous for their shields large and round, painted with bright patterns that make them look like walking frisbees. And their language, Old English, sounds guttural and strange against the soft Latin whispers still lingering in some corners. Quirky fact: Saxon warriors believe that after a victorious battle, their gods would grant them seats in a great heavenly hall called Valhalla, where they'd feast forever. If that's true, you can bet they fought hard because you don't get to eat eternal roast boar without a few scratches. Another oddity: the Saxons were experts at wired, a sort of fatalistic luck philosophy, believing destiny was fixed but could be nudged by one's courage and cleverness. It's like knowing your phone battery's dying but trying to finish your game anyway. Brave or foolish, you decide. The leader of the initial group is a man named Hengist. With his brother Horsa, he sails into the mouths of the Thames, eyes gleaming with ambition. They're guest-sure mercenaries to fight off northern raiders, but their ambitions stretch beyond mere hired swords. Hengist especially is known for a cunning mind that can charm or stab, depending on what's needed. And what's stranger, the Saxons arrived not only with axes and shields, but with entire families, wives, children, craftsmen ready to settle. What started as an arrangement to defend Britain slowly morphs into an invasion by another name. You watch a village near the coast transform. One day it's a British hamlet with timber and thatch. The next it's sprinkled with new-style Saxon halls, longhouses with carved beams and that unmistakable smell of smoke and ale. The locals eye the newcomers with suspicion, but trade begins: salt for grain, tools for livestock, and stories for secrets. In a small skirmish that historians still debate the details of, the Saxons prove their mettle by defeating a local warband. It's less a battle and more a brawl with lots of yelling and some very questionable swordsmanship. Legend has it that the Saxons won partly because their war chant terrified the Britons into dropping their spears, though it probably also had something to do with better armor and a few lucky swings. You might wonder how a handful of newcomers could unsettle the whole island. It's because the Britons are fractured, mistrusting and struggling to fill the power vacuum left by Rome. The Saxons, by contrast, are organized, brutal, and motivated by new gods and old grudges. On one particularly foggy morning, you spot a procession of Saxon warriors marching inland. Their leader, Hengist, carries a banner with a raven, the symbol of war and death. As they pass, children peek out from behind trees, whispering tales of fierce men who don't just fight for pay but for land and legacy. This moment, small and grim, marks the beginning of a centuries-long transformation. Britain's patchwork of Romanized Britons and Celtic tribes slowly unravels thread by thread under the Saxon tide. Historians still argue whether the Saxons arrived as friendly mercenaries or violent invaders. The truth, as always, is messier, a bit of both, with plenty of local betrayal and shifting alliances. As night falls, you find yourself by a campfire sharing stale bread with the Saxon blacksmith, who tells you tales of Thor's hammer and sea monsters. His English is thick, but his laughter is genuine. You realize you're witnessing the start of a new world, not the end of Britain, but the beginning of something else entirely. The old and new collide here on these rocky shores beneath the sky where stars seem a little colder, and the future is anything but certain. You're now inside a smoky great hall, the scent of roasting meat mingling with pipe smoke and the tang of spilled mead. A man named Vortigern stands at the center, an anxious, sweat-dampened leader who's just made what might be the worst deal in British history. He's invited the Saxons in to help defend his lands, a decision that feels less like diplomacy and more like handing over your keys to the neighborhood pyromaniacs. Vortigern's story is a tangled mess of desperation and miscalculation. Legend paints him as a king grasping at straws, or maybe just someone with terrible advice. He asks Hengist and Horsa to bring warriors, but what he really gets is a party that never quite leaves. They arrive as allies, but quickly start acting like rulers, taking land, and wives, and holding feasts where the wine flows like the River Thames in flood. One quirky tale you overhear is about how Vortigern tried to build a stronghold on a hill, but was repeatedly thwarted by mysterious forces later said to be dragons fighting underground. Some say this was a metaphor for Saxons and Britons clashing, while others think it was an excuse for Vortigern's terrible luck. Either way, it's a classic example of how history and myth blend into a strange stew of storytelling. Vortigern's council is a circus. Some advisors urge caution, others call for war, and a few just want to sit quietly with a cup of ale and pretend none of this is happening. The Saxons, meanwhile, are throwing wild feasts and slowly turning guests into landlords. The banquet tables are piled high with roasted boar bread and questionable cheese. You notice one Briton trying to hide a dagger under his tunic, not the best way to keep the peace. When tensions explode, it's less a battle and more a chaotic brawl. Historians still argue whether this infamous feast was a massacre or a mutual bloodbath. Either way, it leaves British nobility reeling and Saxons firmly in control of some territories. Vortigern's gamble backfires spectacularly. Instead of reliable mercenaries, he's invited a rival faction that grows bolder by the day. The Saxons begin demanding more land, more power, and more wives, shaking the foundations of British society. Oddly, some Britons adopt Saxon customs, perhaps out of pragmatism or simple survival. You see children playing with toy shields shaped like those strange frisbees, and women weaving fabrics in patterns that blend Roman British and Saxon styles. In the thick of this turmoil, you hear rumors of secret alliances and betrayals. One particularly juicy story involves a Saxon noblewoman who supposedly switched sides mid-battle after hearing a particularly moving poem, though this may be more legend than fact. Religious tensions simmer as well. The Britons cling to their Christian faith, while the Saxons worship Woden and Thunar gods, who seem less interested in forgiveness and more in bashing skulls. Churches become battlegrounds of ideology and culture, with priests and druids often competing for influence. As dusk falls on this volatile landscape, you realize Vortigern's decision to invite the Saxons is a turning point, not just a political misstep, but the opening act of a centuries-long transformation of Britain's identity, culture, and power. You leave the hall with a bitter taste of mead and uncertainty, knowing that the peace of that night is fragile, and the war for Britain has only just begun. The sun rises over a restless land as Hengist and Horsa, the Saxon brothers, turned power players, tighten their grip on the patchwork of Britain. They're no longer just hired swords or curious visitors. They're kings in their own right, carving out kingdoms with the precision of seasoned generals and the ruthlessness of ambitious siblings. You find yourself at a bustling settlement where longhouses stretch like wooden fingers into the sky. Smoke curls from chimneys mingling with the salty breeze off the coast. The Saxon flag, a raven poised for flight, flaps proudly in the wind, signaling that this is no longer foreign ground but home turf. Hengist, known for his sharp wit and sharper blade, holds court beneath a massive oak, dispensing justice plotting raids and enjoying the occasional dramatic flourish that keeps his followers both entertained and loyal. His brother Horsa, equally fierce but more straightforward, leads warbands into battle, inspiring fear with his booming war cry that sounds like a thunderclap. The brothers' rise is marked by strategic marriages, brutal battles, and cunning alliances. They blend diplomacy and violence with the ease of seasoned chess players. You overhear that Hengist once brokered peace with the British king by offering a feast so lavish it was said to have lasted 3 days, though some claim it was just an excuse to spike the wine. One quirky tidbit: Saxon warriors often tattooed themselves with symbols of protection and luck. You glimpse a tattoo of a wolf on a young warrior's forearm, inked with charcoal and juice from local berries, a permanent reminder that even in a new land, old traditions hold strong. The Saxon settlers introduced new agricultural techniques like crop rotation and heavy plowing, slowly transforming the landscape into a patchwork of farms and villages. You watch as wooden fences rise, separating Saxon fields from the wild woodlands beyond. But their presence isn't without resistance. Small bands of Britons loyal to old kings and old gods launch guerrilla raids, burning crops and ambushing Saxon patrols. The land is a patchwork of peace and skirmishes, with each side vying for dominance. In one memorable incident, Hengist's forces capture a British noblewoman who turns out to be a skilled healer. Rather than executing her, they keep her close, hoping her knowledge of herbs and remedies will tip the balance in their favor. It's a rare glimpse of pragmatism amid the violence. Historians still argue whether Hengist and Horsa were heroic founders or opportunistic invaders. The truth likely lies somewhere in the tangled woods of myth and fact. You sit by a fire one evening as a bard sings of the brothers' deeds, his voice weaving tales of glory, betrayal, and fate. The story's blur lines: are Hengist and Horsa saviors or villains, lords or usurpers? The fire flickers, casting long shadows, and you realize the answers might never come. As night falls, you look toward the horizon where the silhouette of a new kingdom rises, built not on the ruins of Rome, but on the ambitions of two brothers who dared to claim a land that was never truly theirs. You're back inside a grand hall, but tonight the mood is far from festive. The Saxon guests you've grown to distrust, those once invited mercenaries turned landowners, are gathered with the British nobles supposedly to celebrate peace and alliance. Instead, it's a powder keg waiting for a spark. This infamous banquet unfolds like a slow-motion disaster. The tables groan under the weight of roasted meats, coarse bread, and plenty of mead, the kind that makes promises and tempers short. Britons and Saxons sit side by side, smiles, tight eyes darting with suspicion. Somewhere, a minstrel plays a haunting tune on a lyre, the notes weaving unease into the air. Then, as the story goes, knives appear beneath cloaks, a chair topples, and suddenly the feast turns into chaos. One Briton spills his drink onto a Saxon lord's tunic, an insult in any language. Voices rise, swords flash, and what was meant to be a celebration becomes a massacre. Quirkier details pepper the story. One guest supposedly survives by hiding beneath the banquet table holding his breath, while the bloodbath rages above. Another legend has a dog so terrified it runs straight out the door, becoming a village hero for its escape. Historians still argue the details. Was this the infamous Night of the Long Knives, or just a messy brawl blown out of proportion? Did it mark the point of no return between Britons and Saxons, or was it a tragic misunderstanding? The evidence is scarce and the truth tangled in rumor. What's clear is that after this night, trust breaks like brittle pottery. The Saxons tighten their grip on territories once held by Britons, who retreat to the hills and forests nursing wounds and grudges. Life outside the hall is no less brutal. You watch villagers reinforce their homes with thorny bushes and sharpened stakes. Children are taught to hide and run at the first sign of Saxon raiders. The countryside echoes with the clash of weapons and the cries of the displaced. Yet amid the fear, stories emerge of bravery and survival. A woman armed with nothing but a pitchfork fends off a raider trying to burn her farm. An old man leads a band of refugees through secret forest paths, evading capture. The landscape itself seems to mourn. Fields lie fallow where battles were fought. Ancient Roman roads are slick with rain and neglect, serving now as escape routes for those fleeing violence. In the distance, you hear the toll of a distant bell, perhaps from a monastery trying to pray peace into the madness, or a warning of approaching warbands. That night, you fall asleep to the uneasy silence after a storm, knowing that Britain's future will be forged in blood, betrayal, and desperate alliances. You crouch low in a mist-shrouded glade as the first pale light of dawn struggles through ancient oaks. Somewhere in the distance, the rhythmic pounding of hooves drums through the cool air, a steady heartbeat signaling the approach of a leader and his warband. Ambrosius Aurelianus rides into the clearing, his face marked with grit and determination, his eyes reflecting a man who carries not just the weight of a sword, but the heavy burden of a fading empire. Ambrosius is no ordinary warlord. He's a man caught between two worlds, part Roman aristocrat, part tribal chieftain. A survivor of a broken age, he's rumored to be descended from Roman governors who once ruled Britain. His very name means immortal, a defiant statement against the unraveling of order all around him. To the Britons who rally behind him, Ambrosius is their last hope, a flickering flame. In a time when shadows lengthen and darkness threatens to swallow the land whole, you watch as his followers gather, a diverse mix of warriors, farmers, and nobles, turned soldiers, each bearing the marks of hardship and resilience. Their weapons are a patchwork of styles. Some wield rusted Roman gladii, others heft long spears sharpened in the forest, and a few carry crude axes borrowed from Saxon raiders they barely defeated. Yet their spirit is fierce, undimmed by losses or long winters. Ambrosius speaks Latin with the precise cadence of a scholar, but when rallying his troops, he switches effortlessly to the native Brythonic tongue. His voice cuts through the morning mist, confident and sharp as steel. Hold fast, for today we fight not just for land, but for the memory of Rome. and the future of Brittany declares. The men respond with a roar that echoes through the hills, shaking off the chill of fear and doubt. One of the strangest tales circulating about Ambrosius is the legend of a sword, blessed by saints and artifact, said to carry divine power and bring victory to its wielder. Some claim this sword glowed faintly beneath the moonlight, its blade humming with holy energy. Others more cynical believe it was ordinary steel with the story exaggerated by hopeful bards. You overhear a veteran joking, "Whether it shines or not, I'm betting on the arm swinging it." Still, the sword becomes a symbol of hope and divine favor in desperate times. Ambrosius's leadership style is as complex as his heritage. He rules with a stern hand, but tempers severity with moments of unexpected humor. During a tense war council, a nervous noble fretted openly about dwindling supplies and the impossibility of defending their scattered territories. Ambrosius, without missing a beat, retorted dryly, "Better to eat Saxon dust than starve in your halls." The phrase catches on quickly, transforming into a war cry that bolsters morale across the countryside. You follow Ambrosius's campaign as he fortifies strategic hilltops, ordering trenches to be dug and wooden palisades raised. His scouts bring news of Saxon movements, their reports a mixture of urgency and grim resignation. Ambrosius listens intently, his face shadowed by the weight of command, weighing each decision carefully. The stakes couldn't be higher. Every choice could mean survival or annihilation. Yet Ambrosius's struggle is more than just a military one. Internally, he contends with fractured loyalties, rival chieftains eyeing his power, and a populace divided between clinging to the old Roman ways and adapting to the encroaching Saxon culture. The fragile alliances he forges are often uneasy, held together by shared enemies rather than trust. You witness a meeting between Ambrosius and local leaders, some proud descendants of Romanized Britons, others tribal chiefs with little patience for Roman pretenses. The negotiations are tense, punctuated by gestures and veiled threats. Ambrosius must walk a tightrope, balancing diplomacy with displays of strength, all while keeping his vision of a united Britain alive in the minds of those who might prefer to carve out their own fiefdoms. Despite the hardships, there are moments of unexpected kindness and humanity. Ambrosius is said to have shown mercy to a captured Saxon noblewoman, impressed by her intelligence and diplomacy. Rather than executing her, he incorporates her into his court as an advisor, a move that raises eyebrows but speaks to his pragmatic approach to leadership. The lands Ambrosius defends are scarred, ancient Roman roads lie cracked, and overgrown villages are abandoned or fortified in haste, and the once great cities echo with emptiness. But in the forests and hills, life stubbornly clings on. Hunters track deer women, gather herbs, and children play war games with wooden swords, dreaming of heroes and victories yet to come. Historians still debate the true impact of Ambrosius. Was he the last beacon of Roman Britain, or merely one of many warlords trying to survive the chaos? Did he achieve significant victories, or did his legend grow larger with each retelling? The scarcity of contemporary records leaves much to speculation, and the line between history and myth blurs with every generation. As night falls, you sit beside a dying fire with a group of Ambrosius's men. They share tales of battles fought in the rain, of narrow escapes and narrow victories. The air is thick with smoke and the faint scent of damp earth. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots a lonely sentinel in a land desperate for peace. In this fragile moment, Ambrosius is more than a man. He is a symbol. The stubborn heartbeat of a Briton refusing to surrender, a testament to resilience when all seems lost. And as you close your eyes, the whispered legends of Ambrosius drift through your mind like a lullaby for a restless land. You find yourself walking through a landscape thick with fog and ancient trees, where the air hums with whispers of myth and history intertwined. The moors stretch endlessly, broken only by crumbling hill forts and winding streams. Here in this wild and misty Britain, the shadowy figure of Arthur emerges both a man and a legend, a name whispered in hope and awe, shrouded in mystery. Unlike the clear faces of kings and warlords you've seen before, Arthur's story is cloaked in ambiguity. Was he a real leader commanding armies, or a myth born from the dreams of a desperate people? Historians still argue, their voices rising and falling like the tide, over whether Arthur was a flesh and blood warlord, a composite of many heroes, or simply a tale to rally the weary. You press onto a hilltop, where the ruins of an ancient fortress rise against the sky, a place called Camlan, whispered as the site of Arthur's final battle. The stones here seem to hum with the weight of legend, and the wind carries faint echoes of clashing swords and solemn vows. In your mind's eye, you see Arthur not as a flawless hero, but as a man forged in fire and desperation. He's clad in armor, battered from countless battles, his cloak torn by wind and war. Around him gather knights and warriors men who swear fealty not just to a crown, but to an ideal, of vision of unity in a land fractured by Saxons' picks and internal strife. Arthur's name means bear, and in Celtic lore bears are symbols of strength and protection. It's fitting, for Arthur is said to have stood as a guardian of the Britons' last hope. But his tale is not just about might, it's laced with tragedy, betrayal, and sacrifice. One curious fragment of the legend tells of the Round Table, a symbol of equality and unity among knights. It's an idea almost radical for its time, a circle without a head, where no man outranks another. Whether it was a literal table or a metaphor for shared leadership, it offers a glimpse into the aspirations of a divided people yearning for solidarity. You hear the story of Merlin, the enigmatic wizard whose magic and wisdom guide Arthur. Whether Merlin was a real advisor, a druid, or a later invention, his presence adds a mystical layer to the narrative, blending history with fantasy in a way that captivates imaginations even now. At Camlan, the final battle looms, a desperate clash, where Arthur and his forces confront the Saxons in a fight that will decide the fate of Britain. The air is thick with tension, the ground churned by thousands of boots, and the sky heavy with storm clouds. Legends say Arthur fell in this battle wounded but not defeated, carried away to an island where he sleeps until Britain calls him again. You walk among scattered stones and wildflowers, imagining the silence after the storm, the emptiness where once vibrant life pulsed. The battle may have ended, but its echoes shape Britain's identity for centuries. Beyond the battlefield, you glimpse the subtle ways Arthur's legend permeates culture. Poems and songs passed down through generations keep his memory alive, a beacon for those who long for justice and unity in troubled times. In the villages, children play with wooden swords, pretending to be knights of the Round Table. In monasteries, scribes write versions of Arthur's tale in Latin and Old English, each adding their own twist to the story. The line between history and myth blurs, and perhaps that's the point. The story's power lies in its ability to inspire hope when reality is harsh. You rest by a quiet stream, watching the mist curl over the water's surface. Arthur's tale, whether truth or legend, feels like a lullaby for a fractured land, a promise that even in darkness, heroes can rise. Historians still debate every detail, from the battle's location to Arthur's very existence. But to the Britons of this time, and to you listening now, the story is less about facts and more about what it means to hold on, to fight for a future when all else seems lost. As night falls and stars pierce the veil of clouds, You close your eyes, letting the legend of Arthur carry you gently into dreams of bravery, loss, and the eternal quest for a better world. You stand at the edge of a wide, rolling plain, the grass whispering under a cold breeze that carries the distant clang of shields and war horns. Before you spreads the sight of a battle that will echo through the ages, the Battle of Mount Badon. It is here amid the smoke and blood of clashing armies that the tide of the Saxon advance falters, if only for a while. The year is uncertain, the details blurred by time and legend. Historians still argue when exactly this battle occurred, who fought under whose banner, and what the true scale was. Some suggest it was a massive engagement with thousands of warriors on each side. Others think it was a series of smaller skirmishes woven into a single dramatic narrative. Whatever the truth, the impact is undeniable. You watch as British warriors rallying under leaders inspired by figures like Ambrosius, or perhaps even the shadow of Arthur himself, stand firm against the Saxon invaders. They fight not just for land, but for the survival of a culture and a way of life teetering on the edge of oblivion. The clash is brutal. Swords ring against shields. Arrows darken the sky like a swarm of angry bees. The ground churns beneath the feet of thousands, soaked with sweat and blood. You glimpse warriors falling, some rising again with grim determination, others swallowed by the chaos. Amid the smoke and thunder, a moment of eerie silence falls, time stretching, as if the world itself holds its breath. One curious detail: some accounts speak of a long peace following Mount Badon, lasting decades, during which Saxon expansion slows dramatically. Theories abound. Did the Saxons suffer heavy losses, or were political shifts back home distracting their leaders? Or did internal divisions among the Britons forge a temporary truce? No one knows for sure. Meanwhile, life beyond the battlefield struggles to persist. Villagers rebuild homes razed by raids, monks continue their quiet prayers, and children grow up hearing tales of brave men who stood against the tide. The battle becomes a symbol, a collective memory of resistance that fuels hope even in dark times. Yet the pause is fragile. In the forests and hills, whispers of future conflicts linger. The Saxons regroup, new leaders rise, and the struggle for Britain's soul rages on in cycles of violence and uneasy peace. You wander through a ruined settlement near the battlefield, stepping carefully over broken pottery and charred timbers. It's a stark reminder that even victory carries a heavy cost. Families have been torn apart, fields left untilled, and the scars of war etched into the land itself. Amid this devastation, small communities band together, sharing resources and stories, knitting a fragile fabric of survival. In one clearing, you spot a group of women weaving baskets, their fingers deft despite the shadow of loss. Nearby, a boy practices with a wooden sword, dreaming of heroism beyond the battlefield. Historians still debate the long-term effects of Mount Badon. Was it a decisive turning point or a brief respite in a protracted struggle? Did it inspire legends of Arthur and his knights, or did those tales arise independently? The questions linger, tangled like the brambles in the surrounding woods. As the sun sets, painting the sky in fiery hues, you feel the weight of history pressing gently against your shoulders. Mount Badon is more than a battle. It's a moment frozen in time, a beacon of resistance in a world unraveling. You settle by a crackling fire, the scent of pine and smoke soothing in the cooling air. The stories of valor and loss mingle with the night sounds, owl calls, distant howls, the rustle of leaves. In this twilight, you understand that history is not just about kings and battles, but the enduring spirit of people who fight, endure, and hope. With that, you close your eyes, carried softly into dreams where heroes rise and fall, and the future remains unwritten, waiting for the next story to be told. You wake up inside what was once a grand Roman villa, now a shadow of its former glory. The faded frescoes on the crumbling walls tell stories of banquets and gods, while outside the wild encroaches with soft but relentless fingers, ivy climbing over broken columns, moss carpeting shattered mosaics, and birds nesting where once sat noblemen. This is life in the ruins where the past clings stubbornly to the present. In this half forgotten place, you live alongside others who remember Rome's order, but now face uncertainty. The bathhouse, once a place of luxury and ritual, is now a shelter for weary travelers and locals. Its pools have long since dried, replaced by hearth fires and the smell of roasting game. The scent is rich, earthy, sometimes a little smoky, but strangely comforting in its familiarity. Villagers mill about their clothes, patched and worn but proudly displayed. They trade goods, wool, herbs, pottery shards, salvaged from the ruins, with smiles wary yet hopeful. Children play near the remains of the forum, imagining gladiators and emperors, their laughter echoing through empty streets where once shouted merchants and senators. Yet life here is a balancing act. The old ways are not easily forgotten. A local elder chants prayers in Latin, mixing them with Celtic hymns calling upon gods and saints alike. Nearby, a monk carefully copies scripture by candlelight, his fingers stained with ink and his mind drifting between devotion and doubt. One strange sight catches your eye: a monk debating with a local farmer. Whether chickens can be holy, a theological argument that seems both absurd and deeply sincere. The farmer insists that if the chickens lay eggs near the church, they must be blessed. The monk counters with passages from Scripture, neither side willing to concede. It's a small but telling glimpse into the merging and clashing of old beliefs with new realities. Outside the village, the forest is both a refuge and a threat. Hunters track deer and wild boar, their bows taut and eyes sharp. But rumors swirl of bandits and Saxon scouts lurking just beyond the tree line. Villagers bolster defenses with sharpened stakes and hidden traps, wary of the world beyond their fragile community. The roads, once straight and true, are now cracked ribbons, swallowed by weeds. A merchant tries to wheeze his cart along what was once the main thoroughfare, grumbling about the state of the paths and the price of salt. The infrastructure of Rome, the backbone of the empire's power, fades into memory, replaced by a rugged survivalism. Yet despite hardship, community endures. Festivals continue, albeit scaled down and tinged with nostalgia. You witness a harvest celebration where villagers dance around a fire, their voices rising in ancient songs, hands clasped, eyes bright with fleeting joy. The sense of belonging here is fragile but fierce. One oddity you note is how some families cling to Roman names and titles, calling their eldest dux, or comes even as their lands shrink and their influence wanes. It's as if naming themselves after Roman ranks offers a shield against the erosion of status and identity. Historians still debate how much Roman culture truly survived this period. Was it a dying flame flickering in isolated pockets? Or did it lay the groundwork for future societies? The answer, like the ruins themselves, is fragmented and open to interpretation. Amid all this, you find comfort in small routines, gathering wild mushrooms, baking bread in communal ovens, and sharing stories by firelight. The ruins are not just relics, but living spaces where history breathes softly beneath the everyday. As dusk settles, you wander to the old forum steps, now worn smooth by countless footsteps. The sky fades from amber to deep indigo stars pricking through the darkness. Somewhere nearby, a shepherd's dog barks, and the night feels alive with possibility. In this place between the glory of the past and the uncertainty of what's next, you realize that life's pulse continues steady and resilient. The ruins may crumble, but the human spirit endures, finding ways to thrive even amid decay. You lay your head on a rough pillow, the cool night air whispering through shattered windows. Sleep comes gently carrying you into dreams where past and present mingle and hope lingers like embers ready to ignite. You sit quietly in a small stone chapel, nestled between thick oaks, the faint scent of burning beeswax candles mingling with the earthy aroma of damp stone. The walls are covered with fading frescoes depicting saints and angels, figures both serene and distant watching over a world in flux. Here, Christianity clings on a fragile thread woven into the fabric of a changing Britain. The bishops, priests, and monks you see are more than spiritual guides. They are the keepers of knowledge and order in a land fracturing under the weight of Saxon incursions and tribal disputes. Latin remains their sacred language, the tongue of scripture and liturgy, though fewer and fewer understand it fully. Outside the chapel doors, Old English and Brythonic tongues swirl and clash, signaling cultural shifts that unsettle the clerics. You watch as a bishop named Germanus moves among the faithful, his voice calm but resolute. He baptizes a gathering of sheep herders and farmers, their faces earnest and weathered, eager for the promise of salvation in uncertain times. His sermons weave lessons of faith and perseverance, aiming to bolster a people caught between old pagan customs and the new religion. Yet, even within the church, tensions simmer. Some clergy insist on strict adherence to Roman traditions. Others advocate for adaptation to local customs to win converts. A monk debates fiercely whether to translate the Bible into the local tongue, fearing the sacred texts may lose their sanctity outside Latin's embrace. This debate is more than theological, it's about identity, control, and survival. Outside the chapel, you notice a group of children playing near a grove, weaving garlands of wildflowers into crowns, a pagan tradition that refuses to die quietly. Bonfires still flicker in the woods dedicated to gods like Woden and Thunor, whose names evoke storms and war rather than peace. The clash of faiths is subtle yet persistent, a spiritual battleground mirroring the physical one. Quirky tales circulate about the monks one is said to have used crocodile dung as sunscreen. While traveling to distant monasteries, a practice met with amused skepticism by locals. Another reportedly tried to brew beer using an ancient Roman recipe, resulting in a beverage so potent it cleared a village in a single night. These stories humanize the clerics, showing their mix of wisdom, folly, and adaptability. Despite hardships, Christianity offers a framework for hope and order. Monasteries become centers of learning, where manuscripts are copied by candlelight, preserving the wisdom of Rome and early Christianity. The monk's painstaking work is a beacon amid chaos, a bridge connecting past and future. You witness the slow rise of church influence over local leaders who seek alliances with bishops to legitimize their rule. The intertwining of spiritual and temporal power shapes the evolving political landscape, with bishops often acting as mediators and advisors. Historians still debate how widespread Christianity truly was during this era. Was it confined to elite circles and monastic enclaves, or did it penetrate deeply into rural communities? Evidence suggests a patchwork reality, some areas staunchly Christian, others holding fast to pagan traditions. One day you join a procession celebrating Easter, a solemn and joyous occasion, marked by chants, incense, and communal feasting. The ceremony blends Roman ritual with local customs, a testament to the religion's adaptability and resilience. Yet threats loom. Saxon raids target monasteries and churches, seeing them as symbols of an alien faith and centers of wealth. You hear of monks fleeing with precious manuscripts hidden in their robes, seeking refuge in remote hills or across the sea. In these precarious times, the church is both sanctuary and target, a paradox that defines its role in early medieval Britain. The faith's survival depends on its ability to adapt and endure amid shifting powers and cultural tides. As night falls, you linger in the chapel's quiet, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on ancient stone. The words of prayer rise softly, a lullaby for a land seeking peace. You close your eyes, comforted by the knowledge that even as kingdoms rise and fall, the sacred flame of belief burns on a steady light in Britain's uncertain night. You emerge from the shadowed woods into a sunlit clearing, where the land itself seems divided patches of green fields bordered by tangled forests, the air filled with the hum of bees and the distant clatter of smithy hammers. This is a Britain in transition where new kingdoms rise from the ashes of Roman order, their names etched onto the map, like the sharp lines of a sword's edge Kent, Sussex, Wessex. Each is ruled by men with pointy helmets and sharp ambitions, carving out realms with blood and cunning. The process is chaotic and uneven. Unlike the Roman provinces with their clear boundaries and laws, these kingdoms are patchworks of shifting alliances and rivalries. You walk through bustling villages where Saxon customs mingle with lingering Celtic traditions, creating a vibrant, if volatile, tapestry of culture. In Kent, you find a kingdom flourishing near the coast, its rulers quick to embrace Christianity as a tool to legitimize their power. Theirs is a realm where sea trade flourishes, bringing goods and ideas from the continent. Markets hum with activity and craftsmen ply their trades. Blacksmiths fashioning swords, weavers creating patterned textiles, and potters shaping clay into everyday vessels. Sussex, by contrast, clings more tightly to older customs. Its people still honor pagan gods, their festivals marked by bonfires and sacred rituals deep in the forest. Yet even here, whispers of the new faith grow louder, carried by wandering monks and traders. Wessex stands as a rising power, its kings bold and ambitious. You witness a gathering of warriors pledging loyalty, their spears reflecting the sun like a forest of silver. The kingdom's leaders are savvy, blending warfare with diplomacy, marriage alliances, and the strategic adoption of Christianity to consolidate control. One intriguing fact: the concept of kingdom is still fluid. Some rulers claim grand titles like King of the Britons, while others govern only a handful of villages, their authority respected only within narrow borders. The idea of a unified Britain remains a distant dream. You attend a feast in Wessex where a new king is crowned. The ceremony blends Saxon rites with Christian blessings, a symbol of the cultural fusion defining the era. The hall is alive with music and storytelling as bards recite tales of heroism and lineage. You note how the king's advisors carefully navigate the tension between pagan tradition and Christian influence, crafting an identity that can unite diverse subjects. The landscape itself reflects these changes. Earthworks and wooden fortifications dot the countryside, built to protect against raids and rival claims. Roads are less formal than Roman times, narrow dirt tracks, winding through woods and fields used by traders and warbands alike. In villages, daily life revolves around farming, hunting, and crafts. You observe communities working together to clear land, sow crops, and harvest grain. Children learn skills from elders, their play often imitating the struggles of survival and power you've witnessed in battle. The kingdoms also develop legal customs, rudimentary codes blending old tribal laws with Roman concepts. Trials by ordeal and communal judgments become common, reinforcing social order in a fragmented world. Amid these developments, you sense a growing sense of identity within each kingdom, even as larger unity remains elusive. The people's loyalty is local, their traditions deeply rooted, and their futures uncertain. Historians debate how these early kingdoms laid the groundwork for later English identity. Was it a slow evolution of culture, language, and governance, or the result of deliberate political strategies? The truth is likely a complex mix woven from countless personal stories and collective struggles. As evening falls, you walk along a ridge overlooking a village lit by torchlight. The sounds of laughter, song, and prayer mingle in the cool air. The past and future seem to coexist here in the timber walls, the worn fields, and the determined faces of those who call this land home. You settle beneath a sky filled with stars, feeling the quiet pulse of emerging kingdoms. They are fragile yet fierce, shaping Britain's destiny one day at a time. You close your eyes, carried gently into dreams where the echoes of swords and songs weave the next chapter of a land reborn. You find yourself wandering through a dense forest where shafts of sunlight pierce the canopy, illuminating plumes of smoke rising from ancient bonfires. The air is thick with the scent of burning wood and wild herbs, a heady mix that evokes both reverence and wildness. Here in the sacred groves and hidden clearings of early medieval Britain, pagan gods reclaim their place among the living. The Saxon settlers brought with them a pantheon as fierce and elemental as the landscape itself. Woden, the All-Father and God of war and wisdom. Thunor, Lord of Thunder and Protector of the people, and Tiu, the god of single combat and victory. Their names echo through the forests, whispered in prayers and sung in battle hymns. You watch as villagers gather around towering bonfires, their faces illuminated by flickering flames. They wear wreaths of oak leaves and paint symbols on their arms, invoking the favor of their gods for good harvests, protection from enemies, and strength in battle. The celebrations are as much about community as devotion, a time to honor traditions and find courage amid uncertainty. One curious custom you observe is the making of thunderstones, rounded stones, believed to have fallen from the sky during storms thought to carry the power of the gods. These stones are placed at homes and fields to ward off evil spirits, a tangible connection between the heavens and earth. Yet the return of pagan rites is not merely about religion. It is an assertion of identity and resistance. As Christianity spreads through parts of Britain, paganism clings stubbornly, especially in rural areas, less touched by monks and missionaries. The gods and rituals offer comfort, continuity, and a fierce pride in ancestral heritage. You hear tales of sacred groves where druids once held rituals, their knowledge of nature, and the seasons forming the backbone of spiritual life. Though the druids as a class may have faded, their influence lingers in folk practices and local customs. Some villagers still seek their wisdom in matters of healing and prophecy. A strange story circulates of a Saxon warrior who, during a battle, called upon Thunor and was said to have been struck by lightning, surviving unscathed and gaining a reputation as touched by the divine. Whether true or not, such tales reinforce the god's presence in the daily lives of the people. Despite the strength of these beliefs, tensions simmer beneath the surface. Christian missionaries work tirelessly to convert the Saxons, often clashing with pagan priests. In some villages, churches are built near or even on former sacred sites, an effort to overwrite older traditions with new faith. This blending and conflict create a complex spiritual landscape. You witness villagers navigating dual identities, praying to saints by day and honoring ancient gods by night. The religious frontier is as much cultural as theological. Historians still debate the extent and endurance of pagan practices in Saxon Britain. Were they widespread, deeply rooted in daily life, or largely ceremonial? Evidence suggests a mosaic of beliefs shifting with geography, politics, and individual choice. You spend a night in a woodland clearing where a seasonal festival is underway. The air is filled with music from flutes and drums. The dancing shadows of firelight flicker on faces alight with joy and solemnity. Stories of gods and heroes are recited, binding the community in shared memory and hope. As dawn breaks, the fires die down and the forest returns to its quiet majesty. You feel the enduring power of these ancient beliefs, wild, resilient, and deeply entwined with the land. You close your eyes, carried by the whispers of leaves, and the heartbeat of old gods drifting into dreams where the sacred and the mortals dance beneath the eternal sky. You find yourself sitting by a crackling fire in a great hall filled with the murmur of voices and the scent of roasting meat. Around you, bards and storytellers gather their voices, weaving tales of battles, kings and dragons, some perhaps true, others embroidered by time and imagination. The tradition of oral storytelling is alive and vital, a cornerstone of Saxon culture, and a vibrant thread connecting past and present. In this era, bards are more than entertainers. They are historians, poets, and keepers of collective memory. Their tales are not mere fantasies, but vehicles for preserving identity and moral lessons. You listen as one storyteller recounts the exploits of heroes who face impossible odds with courage and cunning, their deeds larger than life but rooted in kernels of truth. One intriguing story tells of a warrior who foolishly challenged a dragon, only to be saved by his quick wit and a clever trick. Whether this tale is fact or fiction is unclear, but it captivates the audience, who hang on every word. These stories serve to inspire caution and bind communities together through shared heritage. The art of boasting, known as flighting, is a popular form of verbal sparring among warriors and nobles. It's a mix of insult, wit, and bravado delivered in poetic form. You overhear two men exchanging verses, each claiming greater strength, wisdom, and valor than the other. The crowd cheers, reveling in the cleverness and theatricality. Music accompanies these narratives with harps, lyres, and flutes, setting the mood. The melodies range from somber laments to rousing battle songs, each enhancing the power of the spoken word. The hall feels alive with energy, a sanctuary where history, myth, and art converge. Yet beneath the revelry lies a harsher reality. The stories often reflect the brutality of the time's betrayal, death, and the constant struggle for power. The bards do not shy away from recounting defeats and tragedies, ensuring that lessons are learned and memory preserved. You note how some tales emphasize loyalty and kinship, while others warn against hubris and treachery. These narratives shape social norms and values, reinforcing bonds within and between communities. One quirky tradition involves the use of riddles, enigmatic questions posed during feasts to test wisdom and wit. You join in a riddle contest, puzzling over cryptic clues that twist your mind and spark laughter. It's a reminder that even in turbulent times, joy and intellectual challenge find their place. Historians still debate the origins and influence of these oral traditions. Were they purely entertainment, or did they play a central role in governance and diplomacy? Evidence suggests they were integral to cultural identity and social cohesion. As the night deepens, you watch as younger generations absorb these stories, their eyes wide with wonder. The bards' voices become a bridge across time, connecting past heroes to future hopes. You close your eyes by the dying fire, carried away on a tide of song and story, dreaming of a world where words wield power equal to swords. You find yourself seated beneath the vaulted ceilings of a dimly lit scriptorium, where the faint scratch of quills against parchment fills the air like a whispered hymn. Here among candlelight and dust sits Gildas, a monk with a fierce temper, and a sharp pen writing a letter that will echo through centuries. His words are blunt, scathing, and unyielding, condemning the kings and rulers of Britain with a moral fury rarely seen. Gildas is unlike the bards and warriors who glorify battle. He is a man devoted to faith and discipline, yet deeply frustrated by the corruption and chaos around him. His letter, known as De Excedio et Conquestu Britannia, on the ruin and conquest of Britain, is both a historical account and a fiery sermon, railing against the failings of leaders who have allowed their people to suffer. You watch as Gildas meticulously details the misdeeds of various kings, calling out their greed, pride, and neglect. His language is vivid and unforgiving, comparing some rulers to wild beasts and others to thieves who plunder their own land. His goal is clear: to awaken a sense of repentance and responsibility among those in power. Despite his harsh tone, Gildas's work is invaluable. It offers a rare glimpse into a turbulent era where official records are scarce. His letter becomes a foundational source for later historians and scholars trying to piece together Britain's fragmented past. One curious detail stands out. Gildas admonishes the Britons for relying on Saxon mercenaries, warning that inviting outsiders for protection only invites ruin. His prophetic tone suggests he foresaw the Saxons' growing dominance and the eventual loss of British control. You also witness the solitary life of Gildas in his monastery, long hours spent copying scripture, fasting, and praying for the salvation of his troubled land. His dedication is both admirable and lonely, a testament to the spiritual resilience amid worldly decay. Amidst the scriptorium's silence, you overhear a heated debate among monks about how much of Gildas's letter should be copied and circulated. Some fear his harsh words will alienate rulers. Others insist that truth must be spoken regardless of consequences. Outside, the political landscape continues to shift. New kings rise, battles are fought, and alliances forged and broken. Yet Gildas's voice remains a steady if stern reminder of moral accountability. Quirky anecdotes about Gildas survive as well. Some say he was known for wearing a hair shirt and carrying a whip to discipline himself. Others claim he once survived a deadly illness through prayer and sheer stubbornness. These stories paint a picture of a man both human and extraordinary. Historians still debate the reliability and bias of Gildas's letter. Was he an objective chronicler or a preacher with an axe to grind? The truth likely lies in between, with his work reflecting both sincere concern and personal perspective. You spend time reflecting on the paradox of Gildas's legacy. His condemnation of rulers contrasts with his role as a preserver of history. His letter serves as both warning and record, a bridge between past sins and future hopes. As evening descends, you watch the flickering candlelight dance across Gildas's manuscript, feeling the weight of his words settle around you like a solemn vow. In a world teetering between ruin and renewal, his voice calls for reflection, responsibility, and perhaps redemption. You close your eyes, carried gently into dreams, where the power of the written word battles darkness and shapes the course of history. You awake to a strange stillness in the air, as if the land itself is holding its breath. Whispers of illness ripple through villages and towns, carried on the wind like a silent shadow. A mysterious sickness has arrived, one that will cut through the fragile fabric of early Britain, reshaping lives and communities in ways that no sword or battle ever could. No one is certain what this plague truly is. Some call it the Black Death centuries before it became infamous. Others whisper of a severe influenza or a contagious fever brought by traders and travelers. Historians still debate its identity, its origins, and its devastating impact. But to the people living through it, it is an all-consuming force that kills swiftly and indiscriminately. You walk through a once bustling village, now eerily quiet. Doors are shuttered, and those who remain wear faces hollowed by fear. The sick are isolated in makeshift huts, tended by family members too afraid to leave but too devoted to abandon. You overhear prayers murmured through cracked lips, calls for mercy from saints, gods, and anything that might listen. The disease respects no boundaries. Nobles and peasants alike fall ill, their strength sapping away under relentless fevers and pains. Entire families vanish overnight, leaving behind empty hearths and whispered memories. The usual rhythms of planting and harvest falter as fields lie untended and granaries dwindle. In response, communities adopt desperate measures. Quarantine is attempted with varying success, and sacred rituals blend with folk remedies. You witness healers mixing herbs and chanting incantations, their efforts a blend of science and superstition. One healer applies poultices of garlic and honey, while another swears by the power of holy water sprinkled over the afflicted. Odd and tragic tales emerge. In one village, a group of neighbors is accused of spreading the plague, deliberately leading to fearful confrontations and even executions. In another, a priest reportedly sacrifices a lamb in hopes of cleansing the land, only to fall ill himself days later. Despite the despair, acts of courage and kindness shine through. Caregivers risk their own lives to tend to the sick, often going without rest or nourishment. Families gather in whispered prayer circles, sharing what little comfort they can provide. The bonds of community, though strained, hold firm against the tide of death. The plague's impact extends beyond the immediate suffering. With so many lives lost, labor shortages disrupt agriculture and craft, slowing recovery and deepening hardship. Social structures waver as populations shrink and power dynamics shift. Some lands are abandoned, entirely swallowed by forest and wild growth. You come across a monastery where the monks have taken to copying manuscripts with renewed urgency, fearing that the knowledge and culture of their people may soon be lost. Their work is a beacon in the darkness, a testament to resilience and hope amid devastation. Historians still argue about the long-term consequences of this mysterious plague. Did it hasten the decline of Romano-British culture? Did it weaken Britain's resistance against the Saxons? Or did it create the conditions for new societies to emerge from the ashes? The questions linger with no easy answers. As night falls, you find yourself alone in a quiet field, the stars overhead seeming impossibly distant. The weight of loss presses upon you, yet within, that sorrow is a flicker of hope, the enduring human spirit's refusal to be extinguished. You close your eyes, carried softly into dreams where life and death dance together, and where the dawn promises renewal even after the darkest night. You step onto a narrow, misty riverbank where the gentle lapping of water blends with the distant cries of seabirds. This is the western edge of Britain, a land where the waves kiss rugged shores and the wild heart of the gales beats strongest. Here in Wales and Cornwall, the tides carry not just salt water, but the restless footsteps of Irish raiders and settlers reshaping the land's future. The Gaelic intrusions arrive in waves, sometimes sudden raids with burning villages and stolen cattle, other times slower migrations as families seek new homes across the sea. These newcomers bring their own languages, customs, and fierce loyalties, blending with and challenging the existing Celtic populations. You watch as fishermen pull nets woven from local flax, their songs a haunting mix of ancient Gaelic melodies and echoes of distant shores. Their boats, clinker-built and sturdy, cut through the surf, symbols of both livelihood and connection to the wider Atlantic world. In the villages, you find a mix of traditions. Some families trace their roots to long-standing Brittonic tribes. Others claim Irish ancestry, their accents and stories distinct yet intertwined. The land bears witness to this cultural mosaic. Standing stones inscribed with Ogham script stand near ancient hill forts, blending old and new spiritual practices. One intriguing detail is the Gaelic practice of Tanaisteicht, a system of succession, where leadership is chosen from among eligible males rather than strict primogeniture. This often leads to disputes, but also ensures leaders are tested and capable, a dynamic contrasting with Saxon inheritance customs. You witness the construction of Crannog's wooden dwellings built on lakes and marshes, providing refuge and strategic advantage. These structures symbolize a connection to water and the natural world, blending practical defense with cultural identity. The Gaelic settlers introduced new art forms as well. Intricate metalwork and illuminated manuscripts flourish with swirling patterns and bold colors, reflecting a worldview rich in symbolism and storytelling. You glimpse artisans working on chalices and crosses their hands, steady and precise. Religion weaves complex threads through daily life. Christianity has taken root, but pagan customs persist sometimes, blending seamlessly. You observe ceremonies where Christian prayers are offered alongside ancient rites, honoring local spirits and ancestors, a testament to the adaptability of faith. Language is a living tapestry here. Old Irish mingles with Brythonic dialects, creating a linguistic landscape as varied as the terrain. Children grow up bilingual, their tongues carrying the rhythms of multiple worlds. Tensions occasionally flare. Conflicts arise over land resources and allegiance, with clans vying for dominance. Yet alliances also form through marriage, trade, and shared defense against common enemies, reflecting the pragmatism necessary for survival. Stories abound of Irish kings and warriors who crossed the sea, some seeking conquest, others refuge from turmoil back home. Their presence leaves an indelible mark on Britain's western fringes, shaping the culture and politics in ways still debated by historians. You join a gathering where tales are exchanged by firelight, stories of sea voyages, heroic deeds, and encounters with otherworldly beings. The oral tradition thrives, preserving history and myth as inseparable companions. Despite the challenges, the Gaelic intrusions enrich Britain's cultural mosaic. They bring new ideas, crafts, and connections that will influence the land's evolution for centuries. As dusk settles over the rolling hills and rugged coastline, you stand on a cliff overlooking the sea, the wind carrying the voices of ancestors and newcomers alike. The horizon is vast and open, a fitting metaphor for a land in flux, yet brimming with possibility. You close your eyes, carried on the tides of time and story, dreaming of a Britain where cultures converge, clash, and ultimately create something new. You find yourself standing on the windswept plains near Durham, where three Saxon kings, Sissa of Wessex, Ceolin of Wessex, and Cuthwine, prepare for a decisive battle that will reshape the map of Britain. The air is tense with anticipation. The horizon seems to hold its breath as the forces assemble their banners, fluttering like storm clouds ready to burst. The Battle of Durham is more than just a clash of armies. It is a turning point that will sever Roman Britain, isolating the West, and carving deep lines of division that echo through history. You see warriors clad in chainmail and leather, their faces painted with determination and resolve. Spears glint in the sunlight, and shields bear the fierce emblems of Saxon clans. The Saxon forces advance with calculated precision, their ranks disciplined and battle-hardened. Opposing them are the Britons, fiercely defending their ancestral lands, but hampered by fragmented leadership and dwindling resources. The clash is brutal and swift, the ground trembling under the weight of thousands of combatants. Among the chaos, you notice the strategic brilliance of the Saxon commanders. They exploit weaknesses in the Briton defenses, coordinating flanking maneuvers that break enemy lines. The Britons fight valiantly but are overwhelmed by superior tactics and numbers. The aftermath of the battle is devastating. The Saxons claim victory and seize control of key cities, Gloucester, Cirencester, and Bath, effectively cutting off the Western Britons from the southeast. This conquest alters the political landscape, isolating Wales and Cornwall and setting the stage for centuries of cultural divergence. You walk through the ruined villages and battlefields, the air heavy with the scent of smoke and loss. Families are displaced, fields lie fallow, and the echoes of war linger in the whispered prayers of survivors. Yet amidst the ruins, resilience takes root. The Saxon victory at Durham accelerates the linguistic and cultural shifts in Britain. Old English spreads into newly conquered territories, while Brythonic languages retreat westward. The fragmented remnants of Romano-British culture find refuge in isolated strongholds, preserving traditions that will later influence Welsh and Cornish identities. One curious detail emerges from local lore tales of hidden treasures buried beneath the battlefields guarded by restless spirits. These stories, whether rooted in truth or imagination, speak to the deep scars left by conflict and the human need to find meaning in loss. Historians continue to debate the exact details of the Battle of Durham, its date scale, and participants remain subjects of scholarly inquiry. Some argue that the battle was part of a broader Saxon campaign to dominate Britain, while others suggest it was a culmination of local rivalries and opportunistic expansion. You visit a monastery near the battlefield where monks labor to chronicle the events and offer solace to the wounded. Their illuminated manuscripts blend Christian teachings with local history, striving to make sense of the tumultuous times. Despite the devastation life endures, you witness the gradual rebuilding of communities, the cultivation of new fields, and the forging of alliances that will shape future kingdoms. The land remembers the battle, but it also heals. As twilight descends, you stand atop a hill overlooking the rolling countryside, the silhouette of distant castles and farms, outlined against the fading light. The echoes of swords and shields have faded, replaced by the quiet resilience of those who carry the legacy forward. You close your eyes, carried on the winds of history, dreaming of a Britain divided yet enduring, where the scars of battle become the foundation for new stories and identities. You find yourself wandering through a village where languages tangle like veins. Neighbors speak in tongues you barely recognize. The transition from Latin and Brythonic to Old English is more than just a change in words. It's a shift in identity culture and the very way people see themselves. Once the streets echoed with Latin phrases, the legacy of Roman governance and Christianity. Merchants and officials traded in that language, its rhythms familiar and authoritative. But now, as Saxon influence grows, Old English seeps in softening edges and reshaping communication. It's the language of warriors and farmers, of poets and kings, raw, evolving, and deeply tied to the land. You overhear a conversation where an elder Briton struggles to understand a Saxon trader's rapid speech. The frustration is palpable, a reminder of how language barriers fracture communities and complicate alliances. At the same time, children born into this new world quickly adopt the Saxon tongue, their native languages, fading like morning mist. The shift in language brings a blur to identity. Who are these people now? Britons, Saxons, or something in between? Communities blend and intermarry, traditions overlap, and old boundaries dissolve. The land itself becomes a patchwork of dialects and customs. In some villages, Latin survives only in church rituals, its sacred status shielding it from everyday change. Elsewhere, Brythonic tongues endure in remote hills and valleys, stubbornly preserved by those holding to ancestral roots. But Old English, propelled by political power and population growth, steadily becomes dominant. This linguistic evolution is not just organic, but also political. New rulers promote Old English to consolidate control, encouraging its use in courts, administration, and trade. Documents and laws begin to appear in the language of the conquerors, reshaping governance. You observe scribes experimenting with the Latin alphabet to capture Old English sounds, laying the foundation for a written tradition that will blossom in the centuries to come. It's a time of linguistic innovation and adaptation. Quirky anecdotes emerge like a Saxon lord puzzled by a Briton's idiomatic phrases, or a monk attempting to teach Latin to children who'd rather speak their village's dialect. These moments reveal the human side of a language in flux. Historians debate how quickly and thoroughly these linguistic changes took hold. Did communities resist or embrace? Was the shift uniform or patchy evidence? Suggests a complex mosaic shaped by geography, social status, and political power? You witness festivals where songs blend languages and poems weave Old English meter with Celtic themes reflecting a hybrid culture emerging from upheaval. Amid these changes, identity becomes fluid. People navigate multiple worlds balancing heritage and survival. Names are anglicized, customs modified, and memories adapted to new realities. As dusk falls, you stand on a hill overlooking a village where children play in a mix of tongues, their laughter a living testament to change. The stars blink above timeless witnesses to the endless dance of language and identity. You close your eyes, carried gently into dreams where words build bridges and shape the future of a land reborn. You find yourself in a cold, stone-walled monastery perched on a windswept hillside where the faint scratch of quills on parchment echoes through the quiet halls. Here a figure known as the Venerable Bede labors tirelessly, his keen eyes tracing lines of Latin text as he pieces together the fragmented history of a turbulent land. His work is more than scholarship, it is an act of preservation and identity, a monumental effort to make sense of Britain's past amid the chaos of its present. Bede's monumental work, Historia Ecclesiastica, Gentis Anglorum. The ecclesiastical history of the English people is a sweeping chronicle that stitches together stories of kings, monks, warriors, and common folk. Written in careful Latin, his narrative serves as a foundation for the emerging English identity, blending religious history with political events and cultural shifts. You watch as Bede consults scattered manuscripts, letters, and oral testimonies, cross-referencing and questioning as he writes. His method is meticulous, balancing faith and reason, legend and fact. He acknowledges gaps and contradictions, striving to present an honest account, while infusing his work with moral lessons and Christian worldview. One curious aspect of Bede's writing is his reverence for the Roman Church, and his portrayal of the Saxons' conversion to Christianity as a civilizing force. His narrative celebrates figures like Augustine of Canterbury, painting their missions as pivotal moments in shaping the nation's spiritual and political landscape. You notice the careful way Bede treats the Britons, the Saxons, and the other peoples inhabiting the land, attempting to reconcile their conflicts and contributions within a unified Christian history. His work reflects both the divisions of his time and a hopeful vision for unity. Outside the monastery, the world continues to shift. Kingdoms rise and fall, battles rage, and cultures blend. Yet within these stone walls, Bede's pen captures the essence of transformation, the birth of a people and a language. Quirky stories circulate about Bede himself, how he began learning to read at age 7, his remarkable memory and his habit of copying texts by heart. Some say he had the gift of prophecy, while others tell tales of his humility and kindness. Historians debate Bede's objectivity. Was he an impartial historian or a devout missionary shaping history to serve the Church's aims? His perspective is undoubtedly colored by faith, but his contributions to historical method and scholarship remain groundbreaking. You sit with monks listening to excerpts from Bede's work, their voices bringing to life stories of kings who fought to unite the land, missionaries who braved pagan territories, and ordinary people whose lives wove the fabric of history. As dusk falls, the flickering candlelight casts long shadows, and you reflect on the power of storytelling, not just to record the past, but to shape identity, inspire action, and forge connections across time. You close your eyes, carried softly into dreams where history's threads intertwine, weaving a tapestry of a nation in the making. You stand on a windswept hill overlooking a land transformed a patchwork of kingdoms, languages, and cultures, stitched together by centuries of struggle and survival. The old Roman Britain has faded into memory while the Saxon realms rise not yet united, but laying the foundations of a new identity. This is Britain remade in blood, faith, and fierce determination. The fields below are dotted with farms, villages, and wooden halls, each telling a story of resilience and adaptation. The air carries the scent of smoke from hearth fires and the distant clang of smithies forging tools and weapons. It is a world both familiar and strange, where ancient traditions mingle with new customs and where the future remains uncertain. Kings rule with varying degrees of power, some commanding vast territories and armies, others holding sway over small clans. Alliances shift like the tides forged through marriage, war, and diplomacy. The concept of a unified Britain is a dream on the horizon, elusive but stirring hearts and minds. Language flows through the land like a river, its currents blending Old English Brythonic and remnants of Latin. People speak in tongues shaped by conquest and coexistence, their words carrying the weight of heritage and hope. Religion binds communities and kingdoms alike. Christianity spreads steadily, its churches and monasteries becoming centers of learning, culture, and power. Yet pagan beliefs endure woven into folk customs and festivals, reflecting the land's complex spiritual tapestry. You walk through a bustling market where merchants trade goods from distant lands, woven cloth, salt iron, and stories of distant shores. The exchange of goods mirrors the exchange of ideas, beliefs, and identities that define this era. Despite progress, conflict simmers. Raids and battles continue, disputes over land and succession flare, and the fragile peace is often broken by ambition and mistrust. Yet through it all, the people endure their daily lives marked by toil, celebration, and the search for meaning. You pause to watch a group of children playing a game of mock battle, their laughter ringing across the fields. Their innocence contrasts with the harshness of history, a reminder that life persists beyond the struggles of kings and warriors. Historians still debate this period's legacy. Was it a dark age of decline or a fertile ground for new beginnings? Did the fusion of cultures create the English identity or mask deeper divisions? The answers are as layered and complex as the land itself. As the sun sets, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, you feel the weight of centuries settle around you. Britain stands on the cusp of change, rooted in its past, reaching toward its future. You close your eyes, carried on the breath of the wind, into dreams where kingdoms rise and fall. Stories are born and reborn, and the land's soul continues its timeless journey. As your journey through history comes to a close, let the tales you've heard tonight lull you into peaceful rest. The echoes of battles, the whispers of legends, and the quiet strength of everyday people weave together a tapestry of resilience and hope. Though centuries have passed, their stories remain alive within you. Gentle reminders that even in the darkest times, the human spirit endures. Wherever you are, may tonight bring you comfort dreams filled with wonder and the calm assurance that history's flow carries us all forward, gently and steadily. I'll be here with another story for you tomorrow night.